Celine, you are a lawyer and founder, there you are down there, and a lawyer and founder of Atallah Law Group. Hazim, you're a social innovator, and human rights advocate. Nadia, you're a chief strategy and impact officer at Amnesty International. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have all of you here. I grew up with three sisters, so I have some sense of understanding how I have to behave today. To start off with, what drives each one of you to do the work that you do? And looking forward at your journey, what marks do you wish to leave in your society and beyond? And Celine?
Basically, so what I do is immigration law, plus I've represented people, high-profile cases, including Americans who are held hostage overseas or unlawfully detained, plus people now who are wrongfully sanctioned by our US government. So I always find myself fighting and standing up for the oppressed. And the reason why it's all relevant anyway to immigration, because the cases that I represented involving naturalized Americans or green card holders who are held hostage abroad or unlawfully detained, I saw how our government, when I worked closely with our administration and Congress and all, how hard we fought to bring even our green card holders back home. And these people, usually they're detained or held hostage because of their freedom of speech, because of something they said or they did. And what's so sad is that what we're seeing now is that people being deported, green card holders being arrested because of their freedom, because of what America stands for. So what I think we should do now is make America great again in its freedom, in its values, in its democracy. That's how you make America great again.
Celine, I have here, I'm supposed to ask you another question. It says, recent shifts in U.S. immigration policy have had a tangible impact on Arab American communities, both newly arrived and long established. And from your vantage point as a lawyer, what are you witnessing on the ground? And importantly, how can we better support individuals who feel targeted or threatened? I think each one of us in this room has probably experienced that. I know I have. In fact, my recent trip to Lebanon, I was tagged coming in and tagged coming out. So in a very serious way. But anyway, what's happening on the ground as far as you're concerned?
So what's happening is just craziness at its highest level. Even clients that I have who are green card holders, even people who I was able to get them naturalized, are terrified to travel or to even say something online or be found or just go to the wrong place or wrong event. They're very scared. Many of them have had trips scheduled to go overseas. They're scared to travel because they know that on the way back, unfortunately, our government can take your phone, do whatever they want under this umbrella of national security, which I feel that sometimes they abuse it. Especially like you said, when you went to Lebanon. I have also a lot of people coming from Lebanon, from the Middle East, and for some crazy reason, most of these people, these are the people, the Arab Americans, also even American citizens, that get sent to secondary inspection just because they're coming from a, Arabic country or, so what's happening is very sad. And I just want to give a quick example because I know that you have to go somewhere important afterwards. There's a person, is a client of mine, but I'm not going to go in depth with the case. He's a green card holder trying to apply for citizenship. And actually this guy, what he did, helped our government a lot in capturing certain terrorists. This person helped our government a lot. And a person like him also has been sent to secondary inspection. So this is crazy. Like what's happening is that I feel that we're targeting the wrong people. We're profiling also just because someone sound a certain way or look a certain way or say something that they don't want you to say. They're being, affecting their citizenship.
Yes, I think that probably one of the biggest issues right now is communications.
Exactly.
There's not enough data in the system to basically be able to identify that individual as somebody that's pro-American has not gotten himself in a lot of trouble overseas, et cetera, and that there's just not enough communications, enough data in the system.
Exactly.
I mean, if you just look at what happened with USAID, aid, I mean, they went out there and shut down everything, and, I know personally what's happening in Lebanon, and that, all the organizations that we've been engaged in, from LAU, AUB, these are American established universities, that their funding is totally cut off. Instead of identifying what's happening with each one of those organizations and recognizing the power and the importance of those organizations in Lebanon to the United States, somebody's missed the cue there. Guys, we're right in the middle of trying to save that country, and yet we got policies that are impacting the country right now. So there's a huge communications fallout that's really causing a lot of these issues.
Exactly.
Hazmi? Hazam. Forget everybody asks me, from the general to the president to you name it in Lebanon, how come I don't speak Arabic when I was born there and I left when I was 4 years old? And that's a whole story in another day, so I apologize for my pronunciation. You have paused literature, you have paused a career and decided to jeopardize a lot of what you've spent 2 decades building to be on the front lines. What drove you to take that decision? And as someone deeply engaged in advocacy and organizing, how do you think the Arab American community can show up more fully to support advocacy efforts like yours? And from your experience, what are the main barriers to organization within our community, and how do we begin to break through them? I hope that makes sense. There's a lot of words there. Thanks, Ricardo.
I say that I did. I left a pretty great career, which I think most people would have envied. I checked all the boxes. Harvard, done. Masters, repeat masters, done. Presidential leader scholar, check. State Department, citizen diplomat, check. I did everything that I believed you had to do to get credibility to be able to positively influence policy, specifically when it comes to socio and economic development in the world and the Middle East, which is where I spent a lot of my time and grew up. And that was the furthest thing away from the truth, because the more success you get, the more you have to lose for speaking about the values that a lot of us espouse to, but shocker, very few of us are willing to risk for. And I was in that. So what happened this last time around after Israel's latest assaults in Gaza is I decided to quit all of that fancy stuff and put myself on the front lines. And I have been hit, I have been kicked, I have been spit on, I have been attacked, I had a gun pulled on me. I went from being somebody who was in all of the buildings I'm protesting as a respected person with a seat around the table to, as my mom now calls me, bin shawari, like a street girl. And I did that because I had to step into my values. I have a little boy. I can't look him in the eyes and tell him, stand up for what you believe in, if I am sitting here pandering to the very system that is oppressing my own family. To what end? To what end am I just espousing two values and not actually sacrificing for them? To what end am I practicing preaching these things but not living by them? And for me, something broke. Something in my heart broke. And I could no longer look at my little boy, who I'm a new mom, first-time mom, and actually, with any integrity, say, stand up for what you believe in if it was words, because I never did it. So I did.
So I kind of understand where you're coming from, because I challenged a multi-billion-dollar company one time, and my father said to me, why are you doing that? I said, it's a matter of principle. But, he said, matter of principle, sometimes you have to understand, is that really worth the time and effort, 7 years you spent fighting these guys? So my point to you is that, do you believe there could have been a different way that you could have used your strengths and the knowledge and everything that you have already gained to change the perspective of how that issue could have been addressed, and that you could maybe have created some type of a more positive vehicle for you to get your point across?
Absolutely not. I think the Arab world is actually the highest concentration of registered nonprofit organizations in the world. What are they doing? They're beholden to their donors, that are beholden to systems that are politically driven. Most philanthropies around the world, and I can say this with a lot of confidence because I worked in those spaces. I worked at the United Nations in the Office of the Secretary General of the United Nations. My last trip to Palestine was actually funded by the US State Department as a citizen diplomat, teaching youth entrepreneurship, et cetera. And at some point, the way to create change is to hold a mirror for the world to see its ugliness and its hypocrisy, and for people in these institutions too. And I know we're running short on time, so I'll wrap up with just Martin Luther King, in the letter that he wrote from Birmingham jail, warned us of the liberals that masquerade as doing progress. And what he was talking about was the people that benefit from the systems because they're consultants for development and innovation, right? But if innovation and development and equity and justice was achieved, you would have no job. So you are part of the problem by not challenging it in a very direct and confrontational way. And it doesn't have to be that, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, is changing the brand of what is an activist, right? It's such a taboo, ugly word, like inti bishawari, or like even when you say it in Arabic, it's like, oh my God, ya latif. But frankly, I have found so much beauty and power and passion in just the persistence of and endurance of literally looking injustice in the face and saying, no, you will not take my humanity away. I will not succumb to your systems of power, because the systems were never designed to advance indigenous communities or black and brown communities. The United States, I always remind people because I worked at the UN was built out of the ashes of World War II to preserve a certain power structure, or none of those countries would have signed on. None of them would have. And when you look right now at the Middle East, and you're talking about USAID and why aren't the Arab countries doing more, tell me what would happen to the Jordanian economy if the United States stopped funding it. Psst, it would disappear. So we have to have honest conversations, if not publicly, within our own communities, and hopefully within institutions like this where we do challenge what's not working and what we can do to fix it without making it feel like there's always an aib of looking internally. We cannot fix outside without looking inside. And I think it is time for our institutions to understand and people to understand that it takes courage. You need courage to create sustainable change. And that sometimes means showing up differently and challenging a system, even though it may not look pretty and it may be challenging and hard. There's beauty on the other side.
I'll come back to asking you one more question on that, but I want to move on. Nadia, you operate at the intersection of campaigns, research, and communications across communities and causes. How do we ensure that the Arab American efforts to justice aligns with broader immigration rights and human rights efforts? In your view, is effective coalition building possible today, and what does it look like?
Thanks for that question, and thanks for the invitation to be here. Thank you, Hazami. Thank you, Celine. It is an honor to be on the panel with you both. I want to start by thinking about frameworks for how we understand things, and I think Hazami started talking about this. Celine, you were talking about the freedoms and the rights, looking at social justice, and how do you understand the connections between the different issues and the different power imbalances and the different struggles that different communities are facing. And for us in this room, as Arabs living in the United States, we are very acutely aware of what is happening to many affecting our own communities, right? We're seeing students on campuses who have spoken up in support of human rights, in support of Palestinian human rights in particular, be targeted over and over again, not just by this administration, but by the university's administrations, by the previous administration, by Congress, by the media demonizing what is happening. We've also seen what's happening in Gaza, and we've seen what has happened over the years in many, many different ways, in a way in which this government, and this country rather, multiple different governments, have demonized and attacked Arabs and placed security at the expense of those individuals' human rights. But one of the things that I really want to bring to the audience today is really understanding that we are not the only, as Arabs, victims of these human rights abuses, and for us to really step into what it looks like to be in solidarity with human rights and with other communities is to understand the struggles that are happening in other communities as well. And so at this moment, yes, those things are happening, as we mentioned, on campuses. But it's also important to understand what's happening at the southern border in the United States, where people who are seeking asylum or who are trying to seek asylum, whether they're from Venezuela, whether they're from Haiti, whether they're from Ecuador, even those who are coming in from Russia and have come through multiple different pathways, are unable to seek their right to asylum at the southern border. Those Venezuelan communities that are now being shipped off to Guantanamo or to El Salvador prisons where there is a complete black hole of their human rights. Yesterday it was Arabs and Muslims being sent to Guantanamo. Today it is Venezuelans. And so I guess I just want to, posit to you all the idea of seeing a framework and understanding human rights and seeing how we can be connected to many different issues, many different communities who are at the raw end of the deal when it comes to human rights, and think about how we do that as a community together. And I think we'll be stronger together as an Arab community trying to stand up for these human rights, but also lend our hands and lend our voices to others that are needing that too, so that they can also be in solidarity with those struggles.
Nadia, it always seems that where there's good intentions, it's always infiltrated by bad intentions. And so do you believe that maybe we have gone to such an extreme that we're not looking at the collateral damage of innocence, but what we're looking at is the outright view that the borders have been open in this country for 4 years, last administration, and we don't know who's in this country, and that we've lost total control of the legal system in this country to identify who's coming in and to basically filter them properly so that everybody has a chance to come to this country. And that when you look at the outright protests that were going on campuses and everything else, do you feel that the protests were also stolen? The visual protests for the benefit of the Palestinians was stolen by infiltration of individuals that were basically outright coming out and saying they were pro-Hamas, pro-X, and that they're, whatever you want to call it, it was basically stolen from them because of the flags flying that U.S. are saying, hey, this is a terrorist group, and you're associating yourself with them. So my point is that in the good, there's always bad, and the innocents are always getting hurt. And I think that what your point of view is that the innocents that have been caught up in this are the ones that are really suffering, where those that are intentionally trying to create havoc, et cetera, are creating a situation of an unbalanced justice. So I just wanted to say that because I think that a lot of times we get lost in the fact that that's happening, and that, how do we correct that in the future?
So there's two things that I would say in response to that. One is I think that there is this this way of looking at who's innocent and who's guilty that is not always that helpful when you're thinking about rights and values and what people's responsibilities and rights actually are in this country. Whether you are innocent or guilty, you have rights to due process. You have rights to a lawyer. You have rights to freedom of speech. You have right to peaceful protest. And this discussion of what's innocent or not could get confused sometimes with that. But the other thing is, thinking about who has the right to be in this country. I mean, at the border, yes, the government can think about who, it has wide discretion for who it allows into this country. Once you are in this country, you have the same rights that everyone else has, whether you're a tourist, whether you are on a visa, whether you are on a green card, whether you are a naturalized citizen, whether you are someone who is born here and has American citizenship. So you have those rights, and it's important that the government is respecting those rights. And right now, we are seeing far too many cases where that is actually not being upheld.
Thank you. Celine, media narratives and public discourse play a huge role in shaping public opinion and policy. How do you see these portrayals affecting immigration debates today, and what can we do to challenge this harmful stereotyping and misinformation?
Thank you for that question too. And I just want to add to what you said, that it's true. What people don't understand is that sometimes is that the First Amendment protects everyone who sets foot on this country. So everybody who's here, whether undocumented Americans, green card holders, they all have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, all these things. So I just wanted to point this out because we've seen politicians on media saying otherwise. And I don't want to name, but there's certain senators and all, they were talking about how a person who's here on a visa or he doesn't have the same freedom, like freedom of speech as somebody who's American, which is baffling. I was thinking to myself, is that even a senator, saying this? Like, doesn't even know our Constitution? So and talking about media, here you go. You're having this senator and others misleading people, giving them the wrong information, and media, unfortunately, not correcting this, either with follow-up questions or at least much articles about, or challenging this, and people just get to be misled. What's very important is also when we come to our Constitution and freedoms, there's freedom of press, and that's what America is known for, and that's what we're proud about. So definitely media is very important, and freedom of press is very important, but you need to take it very seriously.
So Celine, just a
yes.
question. So you just said that the senators or the congressmen were making those statements. Do you think they were making those statements based on some existing laws or reference to freedom of speech or access to supposedly freedom of speech if you're not a U.S. citizen acting on behalf or supporting a terrorist group in this country? So I'm just wondering what were they drawing that ability to make those statements? Do you have any idea what that could have been?
What I think it could be their ignorance and the fact that there's an agenda that they follow, and there's, they get funded by certain, I'm sorry, but who controls this country sometimes, and they just have to say whatever they've been paid to say, even though they should know the truth. But and then I would expect, a person who's in the Senate, would at least know, that we're all protected under, under freedom of speech in this country. So back to your question regarding media, when I was saying that it's very important that we do have freedom of press, but it's also very important to be responsible about it. And it's not good to mislead the people. And sometimes when you're sending wrong information and inciting violence and fear, you can cause big problems, and you could start silencing people in our community, and it's also affecting our freedom, because when we start seeing it on the news many times that like they're amplifying selective voices, and then you're hearing the story from one side, or you're hearing that, okay, immigrants are all criminals, okay, immigrants did this, immigrants did that. But they forget to tell you that this country is built on immigrants. They forget to tell you the stories about successful immigrants, especially Arab Americans. We are the people who contributed so much to this country. We've built this country. We have so many people in even politics, in education, in sports, of course, in the medical field we have.
Well, that's why we have the Tech Cream Awards. Is because
exactly.
It's a vehicle to showcase the greatness of this country and individuals of Arab American background that have given so much. And you're correct. I mean, it's something that has to continue to be spoken to. And as you can see, I'm wearing my colors today. So I'm very proud of my heritage and where I come from. Hazami, correct? No.
Hazami.
Hazami, okay, there we go. I told you, Ricardo, I'm not that great when it comes to names. All right, so Arab American voices in policy often go unheard, yet they are so needed. In your view, what is the potential of these voices in shaping change, and how can we amplify them to drive meaningful, visible impact on the ground?
It's a great question, especially in this political time. I think what people don't understand, and when you look at a lot of the think tanks in Washington, they're funded by like defense contractors. They're funded by institutions that have connections to political foreign lobby powers. You see institutions like the United States Institute for Peace, or all of these institutions, they all have political agendas attached to them behind the scenes, which dictates what they publish. It dictates how they publish it, and it dictates what conversations they're willing to have and not have about policy issues. And until you actually understand the inner workings of this broken car, the car works perfectly for its intended purpose, right? Which is to create think tank reports that then push a specific policy agenda, which then preserves the world order that, for example, privileges the brokenness that we see today. So until you take the moment to unpack the why and the what and the how behind all of this, then we're all part of this myth that somehow working in some forward-thinking think tank without understanding who funds it and how and why and its agenda. I'm not going to mention names of them, but some of them are CIA funded, literally. Literally. These are institutions putting out human rights reports. Dig behind it, who's funding it? Defense contractors with CIA funding. That should make you scratch your head, but we don't. And so a lot of people, and I was part of this, so I can speak to this, from a first person perspective. I was very proud to be invited to a DHS roundtable. Bravo, Hazami. Really? We're normalizing the very violence that we're wondering why we cannot unravel. And so,
I apologize, but we have like 5 minutes
Yes.
left or something. And I wanted to ask that question to you. This question is that what you've gone through already, what is your mission now? And how are you going to execute, continuing to voice your opinion about changes that need to be made? What's your strategy going
Well, building
forward?
political power is also about getting people to understand the power that we have, right? And so being in a city like Washington, it becomes hard because a lot of us come here that are career-driven, and that often means that we're willing to silence our beliefs in order to make it professionally. And then at some point, you sit there in your 40s and 50s and 60s and scratch your head and say, did I actually fulfill my dreams? The answer probably is no. You fulfilled some institutions' objectives which don't align with your personal values. And I think too many people get caught in this. So for me personally, part of where I am now shifting my focus a little bit after I probably destroyed my potential to get jobs in most of Washington institutions is that I look around and I see so many people that actually align with me. So it's time that we build our own institutions. The Arab community is so wealthy, but they are so caught up in immediate crisis funding, right? You tell them to fund a 5-year strategic plan with research. I'm not going to spend the money on research. I'm going to feed one orphan. Okay, there's a lot of organizations that do that. So until we can start to understand how do we build political power, how do we translate street power into political power, and then how do you take that political power and make it institutional power? We're not doing that. We're not touching it. We're nowhere near that. So part of my perspective and what I'm pivoting in my career at this point is starting to understand how do we build true leadership. I would arguably tell you we have a crisis of leadership. We have people with titles. Let me be very clear. A title does not mean you have influence, and a title does not mean you have leadership. And that is, I think, where we need to have an introspection as a community as to what does progress look like? What are our tangible goals? What resources do we have that we can tap into? And how do we start building these things together so that when someone speaks out for Palestine and they get fired, you know what we do? We find them a job. Because we don't need to pander to the systems that don't want to hire us because of our political beliefs that are valid.
Nadia? You have a bird's eye view of the advocacy movement at scale. What would you say to people in this room, regardless of their background, about how they can use their own platforms, professions, or networks to stand in solidarity and take action?
Thanks for that. I think one of the things that I want to really emphasize is right now there is this culture infiltrating our community, which is to silence our community. And people are fearful and scared, and in many ways legitimately so. And I think it's a really important time that we are not silenced, and that's why it's important that we're having these kinds of conversations. And as Hazami was saying, we all have agency in different ways, and we need to claim that agency and think about what your positionality is where you can have an impact and make a difference, right? We're parents. How do we teach our children? We're teachers. How do we educate students? We're community members. How do we get involved in our community? Some of us are parts of mosques. Some of us are in churches. Some of us are lawyers or no lawyers. Lawyers are so desperately important right now. Thank you, Celine, for your work. We need lawyers that are going to stand up in support of those who are being targeted. For whatever reason that they're being targeted when their human rights are being completely trampled on, we need lawyers who are going to be brave and stand up. We need people with wealth to fund activists, to fund people and organizations that are doing the important work. We need alumni who are part of universities to call their universities and say, protect your students. I was a student at one point. We all were students at one point. We had freedom of expression at that time. I don't know how you were when you were a university student. That was where I learned about indigenous rights.
Nadia?
That was how I learned about all these things. So we all have agency. Use that agency.
We're going to kind of round this thing up really quick. Well, do you want me to ask the last thing on this list you gave me? Or you just want to go to questions?
No, I got it.
All right.
Just in this all darkness, I want to give a bright side to that. And in nations are not measured by a few years, it measures in decades. What gave China the Industrial Revolution is actually segregation against the Chinese scientists who were here in the 70s and 80s. When the Chinese scientists were not promoted because of racism and other reasons, they went back and they built China. So I do see the bright side of this is that, which is going to be a lot, and I know I already have 4 colleagues who their labs got shut down, not shut down, because their grants were shut down for their labs. So they had to let go a lot of scientists in their own research labs. So where do you think those scientists are going to go? They're going to go maybe to their original countries, which are some of them ours, and other countries. So this is a process that nature creates to equalize, put everybody on the playing field, including other countries, our own countries. I see that a lot of people will leave here simply to rebuild their own countries. And they leave here with 20, 30 years of research experience and know-how. And this is the biggest step forward in our countries back home. It's sad for what we live here, but I want to look at the future and the bright side of that. Every country in the world will take huge, frog leap forward because of that, because they are acquiring all the science for 20 years for free. So when scientists move from here back to their home country, they're taking back with them the IPs, they're taking back the know-how, they're taking back the culture, and so this is the bright side of here 20 years later forward.
Thank you. For Hazami?
Yeah.
I have a quick question. And first, let me just congratulate you all for your courage, of your conviction, and everything you're doing. In this very polarized world where you're either with us or you're against us, I think there's a middle ground, and the speaker before, Deborah, spoke about the 7 values. My question to you is, in this divided America, where many people know nothing about the Middle East, where the media doesn't report the right data and fact, what is your role, not just fighting up front, but also creating more media sympathetic story, fact-based, and also swaying to you those undecided and in the middle ground? Just a question.
And it's a good question, but I also want to say that we need to move past this idea that we have to bid for people's empathy. And so a good way our group directly has been connected to several resignations from the Biden administration, and they told us it was because we shamed them at the entrance going in and out of work. We stood at the State Department entrances, the White House entrances, and staff was going in and out. We asked them, did you work so hard to commit a genocide? That was literally the question. We'd ask them on repeat. And we had people come out weeping and say, I just resigned. I quit my job, I resigned. And so I think part of education is also, people are inspired when they see people willing to take risks. No one wants to join your silent revolution from your living room, right? People are like, oh my God, Hazami, you're willing to sacrifice your entire career. I got pushed out of my Harvard network. I got pushed out of a social entrepreneurship network that I was a part of. I got pushed out of a lot of things. And you know what? I was sad about it. I'm proud of it now. I don't want to be fake where my entire identity is at stake. So I think the question, to answer your question, education comes from us and our lived experience. We as a group, we're a small handful of activists that are like professionals that put our lives on pause. We have given out over 100,000 flyers, educational flyers, at institutions all across Washington. We literally simply stand in front of media agencies and hand out flyers as people are leaving work. It costs us little to nothing. It costs us our time and our integrity, right? And so I think the question around shifting public opinion, you have to be able to connect with people on a human level. Media is, again, like my comment about institutions, look, most of media agencies, which most people don't know, are funded by the same people. Fox News and CNN have the same funders.
Yes.
Right? So if you start to unpack the realities, you start to understand that media is not going to tell our story. We're going to tell our story, investing into alternative media. And this is where the Arab community needs to step up. We need to fund documentaries. We need to fund, education engagement initiatives. We need to fund art. We need to fund the very things that transcend the heki, the talk, the emptiness, into actually connecting with people's hearts and minds. And that is exactly what I think we can do and we should do. And we've seen our political street theater. You guys might have seen big puppets we made of Netanyahu. They've gone viral. We started doing these like marches in Washington carrying baby bags with white shrouds. Europe has copied them. They've gone viral. Part of it was just thinking creatively. How can I get you to understand my humanity without me having to beg you for it or debate you for it? It is not debatable. My humanity is not up for debate. And I will make you confront it. And if you don't want to confront it, then that reflects your inhumanity. And that's the style and the approach we've taken. And to be frank with you, I found it to be shockingly successful. But I think it just took courage of us doing it. Because for as many people as we influence, I've been hit. That also happens. But it's bruises I'm willing to take for my
I'd like to ask one question to all three of you. What are the 3 practical steps that attendees here today can take to support immigrant rights and push for policy change starting now? It's a question for each one of you.
Sure, and this is kind of related also to what Hazami said and your question concerning media. Now, we know mainstream media is still controlled by funders, whoever. They like I said, they amplify certain voices with who funds these stations But that's why social media is very important. And actually now the younger generation are more into, they watch everything on social media. And because of the lack of credibility that the mainstream media is starting to have, that's why social media became a very powerful alternative. And, okay, sure. So when it comes to social media, it's very important. Not only this, when you said that's what we can do. At your job, you could tell your story in the social media, and also make sure you contact your senators, representatives. And the Arab Americans are so powerful in this country. And if they unite, they can make a huge difference in every state. I mean, whoever is running, in the end, with elections, we know how it is. They want our voices. So they want our voices. They have to do what we tell them to do, basically, especially if it's something that has to do with our rights, human rights, as Americans and as Arab Americans, most importantly, what's going on in the world.
Thank you.
And I'll just close with 2 things. One is with narratives and with getting to different communities, one of the tactics that we've found very successful with Amnesty International, and I do want to say we don't accept funding for any of our campaigns or research from any government or corporation. It is all from individual givers. So thank you to the individual givers that fund Amnesty's work. But individual stories are incredibly powerful. So why are we lifting up Mahmoud Khalil's case right now as Amnesty International, and so many people know Mahmoud Khalil's name? It's not because Mahmoud is the only one who is being targeted right now, or he is the only, his case is more important than someone else, but it's an emblematic case that you can lift up, that you can put a human face to what the injustice that is happening right now, and you can push for a systems change. So just that's one thing. But what can you do? One more agency that we all have, and those who are Americans, is that you have congressional representation, and we must demand that Congress is listening to its constituents right now. So write to your member of Congress, demand that they are holding a town hall, go to that town hall, ask them questions about what is happening, ask them what they are doing with their power to uphold the laws, to uphold human rights every single day when they're going into to Capitol Hill.
Thank
And
you
most
so much.
importantly, also, I just want to add one last thing. Keep in mind, now it's starting with the immigrants. but it's coming after us as Americans, all of us. Once you start saying that immigrants have no freedom, Mahmoud Khalil, a green card holder that has no freedom, you could easily strip his rights away, no protection under Constitution. They're coming after us all. So that's why we really have to take it very seriously, stand up, speak up, and work, against everything that's happening right now.
Thank you both for being here, and it's a pleasure
Thank you.
having the opportunity to
Thank you.
participate. Thank you.